Welcome to Honeybee Watch Symposia series. This is our third event and the last of 2023. I'm Steve Rogenstein. I'm your host and the behind-the-scenes producer and Honeybee Watch's project director. And I'm joined by Arrigo Moro, who is our science director. And today we'll hear from 4 experts who will share their research projects and experiences with free-living bees. And today in particular, we're going to talk about wild, a term that is laden with connotations and controversy. So the purpose of the Symposia series is manyfold. As I said, it's an international coalition. What we're trying to do is bring experts together to introduce them to one another, to start and spark dialogue, to introduce you to them and their projects, and you to one another. It's also a platform whereby we can hear about different experiences and perspectives related to free-living colonies and to discuss individual issues. So in the past, we spoke about monitoring. In September, we also talked about data sharing and data rights. And today, we're going to talk about wild. So today's title is Wild, Free-Living, Feral, Definitions for Consistency. And each of these terms has sparked numerous discussions, and we have not come to any clear conclusions. And so in this dialogue today, we really wanted to get to the heart of what is wild. It seems easy enough, but unfortunately it isn't. Today we'll attempt to unravel why and maybe work towards a clearer understanding and a clearer usage of this term. And through a couple of brief illustrations in no particular order, I'm hoping to introduce the complexity and some of the controversies. So to begin, we interchange wild living with free living. Some people use one of the terms and the other. They're interchangeable as we see it, but these are distinct from feral. So feral often refers to escapees. But in this context, if a swarm from a managed apiary settles into a tree cavity, for instance, while we acknowledge that it's a feral colony, until when is it? Does it ever revert back to being in a wild state? And who defines this process? And this is something that we have discussed interminably and have not really come to any kind of resolution. Additionally, as I said, we've been working with IUCN. And in 2014, they gave the data deficient label to Apis mellifera. And the reason was because there were complications between wild and domesticated. And, IUCN, they're working with animals across the globe. And when you're talking about a whale or a rhinoceros, yes, if seen in nature, it's wild. But in the case of honeybees, many view them as a species that's incapable of surviving without human interventions. And obviously, we challenge that. You can't control their reproduction. You can't control what they feed on or where they forage. And so this dichotomy of wild versus domesticated doesn't quite apply to Apis mellifera. Some people instead use managed as the opposite to wild, but again, we don't have a universally accepted definition here. So going back to wild, are we talking about a colony on an individual basis? Is it an entire population? And if we're talking about wild populations, are these self-sustaining, whereby they're isolated from managed hives that could cast swarms and possibly dilute genetics? And then what happens when a wild population exists, but not in its original geographic range? Is this considered wild also? Something else? Does it deserve protection? And then in common parlance, wild bees these days is often associated with solitary bees. And the question is, can honeybees be wild too, or do they beg a new descriptor? So this is just a couple of examples of topics that we've been pondering at Honeybee Watch. And while many have addressed these, for instance, Vincent Ambouy, I don't know if he's here today, or Francis Cordelot, they're drafting a glossary of terms, but there are no universal answers yet. And obviously within science, it's important for us to come to consensus so that we have consistent definitions, to know that we're talking about the same concepts and that population characteristics specifically are referred to universally. So that's a lot to process, but those are kind of the topics that we're going to discuss today. I could go on and on, but we're really here for our guests. Michael founded Apis Arborea. It's a nonprofit in the US that's dedicated to honeybees and pioneering new ways of conservation through wilding. Again, the use of this word. They advocate for tree beekeeping, offer workshops, training workshops. They're researching a couple of nature preserves in Northern California and Oregon for the presence and survival of free-living bees, and co-organizes the Arboreal Apiculture Salon, among other things. In full disclosure, he and I are going to be producing the next Learning from the Bees conference, slated for 2025 in California, so stay tuned for that. And in particular, we invited Michael because he's sensitive to words and how they can consciously and subconsciously frame conversations and in turn conservation efforts. And thus the term wild is very important and something that he often ponders. So if you are ready, I'm going to give you 10 minutes and then we can start.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thanks for inviting me. What a great topic. And I so enjoyed listening to the three previous speakers. Very, very inspiring. And so, I, as a caboose, maybe this is another opportunity to explore different perspectives and viewpoints. Maybe initially a few words about Apis Arborea and about who we are. We are located in California, USA. We are a nonprofit organization that promotes holistic pathways of honeybee conservation, research, apiculture, and innovative watershed-centric programs for the protection and regeneration of local populations of honeybees. Our comprehensive ecological framework integrates innovative conservation models while emphasizing the intrinsic value and agency of all life forms. Apis Arborea's work centers around three main interventions. That is restoration and conservation. We are having a few conservation programs with small family farms and other things. Education, like the salon, and research. You can reach us at the web address there below. I want to just touch in briefly on our main research project that is situated in Northern California. It is called the Galbreath Wildlands Research Project, where we study wild naturalized Apis mellifera in a remote bioregion. This project as a whole also has a special focus on interdisciplinary collaboration. We are always inviting in other interesting parties and stakeholders to join this project. It is owned by Sonoma State University, and it's about 3,600 acres, and which then are surrounded by thousands more of privately owned wild property, wild land. Just maybe a little bit more information about where we are currently. This is the nest density within Galbreath. By the way, we consider Apis Arborea as a novel wildlife of the Americas. Having been 3 years into this project, we have also, like Fabrice mentioned, beelining. We located 35 trees so far, and 18 more areas with non-identified bee trees, and that gives you an idea of nest density. So one could say 5.5 per square mile is probably the minimum in that area. Those numbers are representing the West Coast in California, and you can compare that against numbers at the Arnold Reserve and Thomas Seeley study, and those numbers were we are probably at double the amount, twice the numbers. So now, as Steve, you already mentioned, I find it quite interesting sometimes to step back and look at the premises on which we work and also define and develop programs. So wild versus domesticated. frameworks are powerful in that they lay out our field of research and perception. They determine what is thinkable and what is not thinkable. And therefore, we are caught in binaries, in dichotomies, wild versus domesticated. And that generates a certain kind of thinking, right? Versus we could also frame this as ecologies governed by beekeeping versus by symbiotic systems. And symbiotic here is a novel word that refers to collaborative, interdependent mode of existence where entities co-create and mutual influence each other's emergence and behavior. So novel perspectives is something I would like to bring into this conversation. Novel perspectives in conservation and life sciences think in terms of networks and interdependencies to represent highly complex systems. And as we all know, we are all lost to our love of honeybees in one way or another. Being insect and mammal, honeybees are transcending binaries and dichotomies. So that is, for us, we kind of have an advantage of working and having bees in our life that kind of intrinsically is already holding that points towards alternative pathways of perception and things like that. So shifting beyond contemporary metaphors to explain and explore the world of honeybees. And I want to now go through a few, and I'm pretty sure I will run out of time. One is called actor network theory, developed by Bruno Latour, examines how both human and non-human entities influence and shape social networks. It emphasizes the agency of non-human elements, considering them as active participants in creating and maintaining these networks. Another one is called nature culture web, from the field of science studies, feminist theory and anthropology, and environmental humanities that have challenged the conceptual framework that separates nature from culture, human from non-human. And then, of course, in this context, we have to talk about the holobiont, representing a paradigm shift in biology. It refers to a host organism and its complete ecological community of symbiotic microorganisms living within and on it, forming a functional unit of life. And then in the same context now, we all are so ingrained and used to a thinking in terms of individuals, even within the field of honeybees. Patrick talked about metapopulations, but who is the individual here? And in new movements within biological sciences, the biological individual is the pivotal across genetics, immunology, evolution, anthropology, and so forth, shaping how data is integrated within these fields. But recent analysis have disrupted these traditional definitions by revealing extensive interactions between animal, plants, and symbiotic microorganisms, blurring established boundaries of individuality. What do you say to that? When that what we take for granted that also represents the very foundation of what we all do is actually put into a new context that opens up new perspectives. And Earth system sciences are going in the same direction. I have to skip here a little bit because I will run out of time. And then, of course, the human and other than human beings, the topic of going beyond the human, this conceptual shift towards other than human world goes beyond a cross-cultural understanding of nature and instead challenges our ability to comprehend modes of existence that destabilize the boundaries of self and the social, the organic and inorganic, the single and the multiple, and many more deeply rooted conceptual binaries. And one more of those concepts which have been developed by Karen Barad. She calls it intra-action, and that throws kind of almost everything we know out the window, which suggests that entities emerge and take shape through their ongoing mutual entanglement, where their boundaries and identities are continually co-constituted in the process of interaction itself. So each of those would require a whole day of discussion, but I do believe it is of utmost importance to increase our awareness for that was happening in the periphery, because the future is being born right there, I would say. And how can we recenter towards an animated world where, in the context of honeybees, now we also integrate, for example, their conation, agency, and sentience. And conation, I just learned, as a word which I find quite powerful. And I wrote the definitions here as the capacity to generate responsibility and motivation to take moral action in the face of adversity and perseverance through challenges. And really the question here is, how much does that is a factor in natural selection and evolution, for example? Same with beauty, for just to mention. So
You've got 1 minute.
all right. So how can we integrate principles of mutual entanglement and non-binary perspective into our human and scientific inquiry? That's all what I'm trying to do is here with you is to share my own questions with you all. But some people try to answer those. For example, Otto Schaumer from MIT, by developing Theory U, which integrates very different modes of operation, modes of being for problem solution and development of innovative models, whether that is for conservation, you name it. And also a more indigenous approach that is called two-eyed seeing, that is, one can say, a requisite guiding principle in collaborative, transdisciplinary, transcultural work and integrative science. And I want to end with just marveling and enjoying for just a few seconds this being in its expression in this particular tree that is part of the Galbreath project, in all its emanations, and also in all their unknowns, because that is all that is visible from the outside. And to share with you that survival rates with our limited data set we have collected at Galbreath is right now probably at over 82% or so. So, and that's it. Thank you for witnessing me rushing through all those points.
Well, in true form, Mikhail, you have blown our heads into the stratosphere and then brought us right back into a tree cavity with the bees. So this is great. Thank you to all of our presenters, really giving us lots of food for thought, from the very practical, from the genetics to new ways of thinking and scientific approaches. And hopefully that will spark some dialogue